William Blake's message throughout his entire body of work is the tension between the necessity and the impossibility of binding the infinite. This occurs both literally and abstractly, with the binding of the infinite often taking the form of chained and trammeled gods. Creation, for Blake, is the self restriction of infinity, and it is the task and purpose of poetic inspiration and spiritual beauty to attempt to rediscover the infinite in all things. In the Book of Urizen, published by Blake in 1794, he describes science as a tent and a trap that, with infinite labor, hides the essence of the infinite in all things, to make it possible to understand a finite, non eternal world. The trap that catches our thought patterns that reach toward the infinite is called the net of religion. Science hides the infinite, and institutional religion traps our movement towards it. According to Blake, there are 5 ways that we interact with the world, all of which have their essence in infinity: breath, intuition, soul spirit, vision, and conscience. The world is alive. A fairy says to the speaker of Blake's 1794 poem, Europe, a Prophecy, that I'll sing to youth this soft lute and show you all alive, the world when every particle of dust bursts forth its joy, and speaks of each flower and material object as eternal. This is Blake, who urges us in Auguries of Innocence, published posthumously in 1863, to see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. The import of Blake's poems is that all things are everything, and everything is in all things. The fairy to whom the speaker of the poem converses is said to have dictated the text of Europe, Blake's shocking prophecy for the European continent in the modern era. Europe begins with the awakening of the eternal female, anathemon, one of the 4 aspects of humankind, symbolizing female love, who, after 1800 years of being told by Urizen, another aspect of mankind representing masculine order, conventional reason, law, and religion, who says that woman's love is sin. All 4 of the aspects of mankind, the Zoas, are in rebellion against God, together forming Albion, Blake's equivalent of Adam, the first man, and thus all are subversive forces in the human collective consciousness in a qualified sense, because they are the collective consciousness. The reawakening of anathemon represents the suppressed feminine soul of mankind reemerging in modernity as a subversive element because of the improper integration of the previous social order. The effect of this transformation, in a general sense, are the movements of the past 200 years towards enlightenment and destruction of the old social order, sexual liberation, equal rights, and so forth, for whom all the language is closed in some sort of freedom from an element of the traditional order. They were dull, but we are enlightened. They were repressed, but we are liberated. They were oppressed, but we are free. Blake is saying that these movements are the expression of the repressed feminine returning in 19th century Europe in the form of the philosophical Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and elsewhere, because the old morality was too stringent and stifling to the human spirit. The god of law and order used to seduce the human race into repression of their spirit and vitality, telling them that woman's love is sin, that an eternal life awaits the worms of 60 winters. But man did not want to be a worm anymore. This is the motif that comes up later for Nietzsche. So essentially using religion as a tool to stifle human expression. But the converse is bad too, of course, saying that this life is all there is, and we can be as unrestrained as possible as long as we are creative and free. The productive synthesis between these 2 poles, tyranny and frenzy, Apollo and Dionysus, order and chaos, is the high energy experience of the infinite in all things, as Blake might say, such that human mortals can make genuine contact with God, whose essence is infinity. Joy, for Blake, is the truest religious experience, which is fundamentally anathema to law and order. The subversive and anti-moral spirit of modern society arouses to spirit of pathetic wrath, rinthra, as they might have in the old times of the Old Testament prophets as well. Europe has forsaken God and morality in Blake's view. Blake writes that the heavens of Europe, meaning its spiritual root, is filled with immortality, with demons of futurity that in council gather the smitten angels of Albion, of the fallen man, meaning that Europe is accursed in modernity because the collective intentions of the continent are arranging the events of the 19th century to fit the worst angels of man's nature, preying away on the ugliest of man's instincts to destabilize the world and turn it away from God. This then culminated in the 20th century with the Russian Revolution and the First and Second World Wars, which were, in their essence, blasphemy against God, the spirit of love and unity, and the sanctity of the human spirit and life. The end of the moral universe occurs through the council house, down rushing on the heads of Albion's angels. This means that the political institutions of Blake's time were directly attacking the better angels of man's nature and our positive instincts towards one another, thereby demoralizing mankind, spawning demons arising from the ruins of the previous world order. The evil spirits to whom the world belongs bend downward and shut the golden gates to the variegated colors of the heaven of heavens, and to make us turned outwards, barred and petrified against the infinite. This is Blake's thesis in Europe. The modern world is a denial of spirit and a turning away from the infinite essence of the creation, leading to atrocity and wickedness. The evil spirit erects a serpent temple, the labyrinth of the modern day, the global structure that works through institutions against the purpose and end of the infinite, creating a false image, an idol that causes us to believe in that heaven is something physical and God a mere omnipotent human tyrant, and therefore science has disproven all of spiritual reality or the duties we have to one another. Absurd, nonsense. The dual sins of seeing God as non-existent or finite correspond to the present and the past. What we ought to do for Blake is the future. We ought to see God as the infinite. Once we recognize the world for its source and essence in infinity, then the Ancient of Days will return, because we'll have taken the old story, revivified it, and given new life to the human spirit, saving Europe, the Western heritage, and the world at large. This cannot occur sola scriptura, through the book beloved of Urizen, the spirit of biblical law of order, and it can't occur this way in the age of Anathemon, the god of female love. The cat is out of the bag, but rather through the rational and intuitive understanding of a theological infinite that grounds and sources reality, and a metaphysic that justifies the ways of God to man, in the immortal words of Milton, proves the ends and purposes of the one infinite creator, provides a rational basis for the classical worldview, and corrects for the excesses of modernity. In my view, this can be achieved only through the CTMU meta-religion, which describes God as the one infinite creator, and his teleology as the self-identification through humans and conscious agents who participate in the unfolding life of reality through contact with the transcendent. To those with ears to hear and eyes to see, it is clear as springtime that the howl and suffering throughout Europe and the delight and rebellion underlying modernity is a result of forsaking the creator and king of existence. Blake writes, above the rest, the howl was heard from Westminster, louder and louder, as monarchy, aristocracy, religion, and tradition are slayed by anathemon in the spirit of modernity. I'll close with the words of Pope John Paul II, perhaps a great embodiment of Urizen in the modern era. Freedom is not the ability to do anything we want, whenever we want. Rather, freedom is the ability to live responsibly within the truth of our relationship with God and with one another. Blake's message to Europe is to abandon the spirit of thou shalt not and fear. Do not abandon science or love, but rather integrate these into a more full and complete understanding of metaphysics and Luitha. Luitha means literally in Blake's mythology, sex under the law, but perhaps on a deeper level is the sublimation of spiritual beauty and poetic inspiration under the auspices of God and truth, love of the infinite creator and goodwill towards one's fellow man. This is what is needed not only to save Europe and Western civilization, but humankind as a whole. Europe still, despite its historical tendency to brother wars and its current troubles with kowtowing to its globalist masters, has an important role to play in fulfilling the destiny of mankind. To do so, they must restore the eternal patterns and divine archetypes of masculinity and femininity that underlie the human experience, neglecting neither man nor woman, restoring some semblance of traditional morality, and resolving the societal ramifications of these conflicts. In essence, Blake is critiquing in Europe the societal norms and structures of his time, pointing towards a need for a more holistic understanding that transcends the limitations imposed by institutional religion and impressive moral codes. The emphasis on recognizing the infinite in all things, embracing joy as a religious experience, and reevaluating the concept of God contribute to a call for spiritual awakening and a reconnection with the essence of creation. There's a natural tension between traditional religious authority and the need for a more liberated and responsible understanding of freedom. The call to abandon the restrictive thou shalt not should not be replaced with a more deleterious do what thou wilt mentality, but rather an integrated and metaphysical worldview blazing a path towards a harmonious coexistence of science, love, and spirituality. I invite you, dear friend, to reflect on the societal paradigms and spiritual frameworks that shape your understanding of the world, and to reconnect with the infinite and a more comprehensive metaphysical understanding and the eternal truths of existence and reality. Let the light shine forth in the darkness, and the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.